Hey everybody, William Wallis for America here. And as you know, one of my missions is to not only find solutions, but bring more people together. And what I really like doing is finding people with not only different opinions, that maybe people that come from different places, but find people that have the same thing in common, but you might not expect it. Doing things in ways that bring more people together, because I think the more that we find ways to unite each other on ideas and principles, instead of getting divided on ideologies and what party you belong to, we're going to talk about ideas, principles, and solutions. And one of the people that I've always admired here in our state of Louisiana is Elbert Guillory, and I brought him on today because when you hear about his unique story and what makes him the person that he is and his political beliefs, you might be surprised, and you might actually hear some stories. Well, I can't say might. You will hear some stories that you've never heard before, and you will find this to be one of the most interesting videos I think you'll have watched in a long time. Elbert, thank you very much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure, a real pleasure.
Okay, I had to expose the mic there, make sure. Well, I thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for the pleasure part of it. I appreciate that you think that highly of this. And we're going to do just that. We're going to make this a video that people will see that value, in this video. I've talked about people having all kinds of different values and finding ways of people bring people together. And when I hear you speak and hear you out in public, you seem to do a lot of that.
I do. It's the values issue is very close to my heart. I'm a country boy from the semi-rural South, and all of those values of Christianity and hard work, it's just what created me. I'm a product of that.
You're a country boy.
Oh yes, yes indeed.
I love it. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about you. You're a practicing attorney. There's a lot to get out, guys, so you have to hang on here with this. But you're not only a practicing attorney. Tell us a little about your background. But before I forget, I want to let people know that we are filming this video in a family home that's been a part of your home for generations, and I'll let you tell about that in a minute. But first, about you, your education, kind of where you've traveled around, and being an attorney.
I went to school in the Northeast, graduated from Rutgers. I'm a Rutgers lawyer, a New Jersey lawyer first.
I love it.
But New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Washington, D.C., New York, Seattle, Illinois. I've lived and worked all over the country, mainly enforcing civil rights laws.
So you mentioned here before we got on the interview that you've been a human rights, you worked in the human rights industry for a long time.
Absolutely. In most of those states, I worked for the State Department of Human Rights or Division of Human Rights, and enforced modern civil rights laws.
Okay. Well, right now you're a practicing attorney as a criminal defense attorney.
Yes.
So civil rights is something, and human rights is something near and dear to your heart, because in our country, that's basically the same industry.
It really is. It's the fight for justice, the quest for justice.
Okay.
Whether in the criminal justice system or ensuring human rights and equal rights, it's all one to me. It's
all exactly, helping people. It's another way to help people who are in a time of need too. Now, of course, referring to criminals at many times, but again, it makes you more aware of our justice system and makes you more aware of human rights and civil rights at the same time.
Absolutely. One of the problems that we have with the criminal justice system is that too many people want to destroy, they want to defund the police, stop law enforcement, throw out in immigration ICE,
right,
and throw out consequences, and that's not good for the country. That is not good. Even little children must understand that there are consequences for bad behavior. Mm-hmm. Those consequences should be just, and they should be justly applied. But there should be some consequences.
I understand. Well, can we tell people real quick about this house that you're in right now? That this is where your law office is, but you told me a little story that I'd love to share with people about this property.
Yes, my grandfather was born on this property in the 1850s. He was born a slave. And the big house, this was part of a big plantation at that point. The big house is still a city block from where we are sitting.
Yeah.
And after slavery was over, my grandfather and his brother stayed on, worked for their former master, and got to be so valuable to the former master that he sold them half of what is now a city block that we're sitting on.
Wow.
And that where my mom was born and where I was born and where I now practice law.
I'm beginning to see a real picture here. So you are a descendant of slaves. You've been in the human rights business for a long time, all over our country. So you've been in states that people would, politically compared to, say, blue states or red states. You've been really all over the place. So you kind of have I'm showing the public who we're talking to here that you've got a lot of quality, a lot of experience in this.
Yes, a lot of experience is accurate.
What, now you grew up Catholic, I understand, right?
Yes.
But there's something else to tell people.
Well, Mom was a Baptist and Dad was a Catholic.
Right.
And so I kind of grew up in both of those churches. Started my life as a Catholic and made a switch when I was quite mature.
Yeah, to be a Baptist preacher.
And yes, became an ordained Baptist preacher.
Tell us the story you talked about when you said when your mother passed.
Mom always wanted me to be a Baptist preacher since I was a little boy. 50 years ago, I went to New York Theological Seminary, so I've been prepared for the pulpit. But I just
so theological seminary and law school.
Yes.
So, okay, I'm just pointing that out, but
well, studying the law.
Exactly.
And so when she died, she went upstairs and she just pestered the Lord, and I had to stop running. And so on the anniversary of her death, the first anniversary of her death, I became an ordained Baptist preacher, and she smiled.
I like that. You stopped feeling that finger being poked in your side, didn't you? Or thump on your head?
She was quite a diligent lady.
Yeah.
She was accustomed to getting her own way, even after she left.
Now, where did you? And also, another thing to point out here, another good quality, is that you're a veteran.
Oh, absolutely.
What branch of the service?
United States Navy. When a lot of politicians were cutting and running and going to Canada and going to school in Europe so that they could avoid the draft, I was 4F. I tore up my draft card.
Okay.
And walked into the Navy recruiter's office and said, I'm here. And before I walked out, I was a member of the United States Navy.
Nice. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. My dad fought in World War I. My brother in the Army. My brother was in the Army Air Corps during World War II. One of my sons was in Afghanistan. And I was able to, during the Vietnam years, serve in the Navy. We fight our country's wars, and we pay our country's taxes. We are Americans.
I love that. I love that. Well, that's one of the things that makes our country great, is having people like you that have served our country and protected our freedoms and liberties. Now, you said you went to law school at Rutgers. So, and you gave a little interesting tidbit about Rutgers before we came on camera, that you said it was a college.
Rutgers was a university before the United States of America became a nation.
So it's one of the oldest universities we have in this country.
Absolutely.
And you remember that?
Oh, yes. One of the top 5 law schools in America.
Now, where did you go to your undergraduate?
I went to Hampton Institute, Norfolk State University, and Old Dominion College, and Southern University. I was expelled from Southern University, and that's how I was able to go to these other schools on the East Coast.
What's one of the unique things about one of those universities that you attended? You said something about you being the first?
Yes, I desegregated Old Dominion College in Virginia, in Norfolk, Virginia. I didn't set out to be a trailblazer there. I was still continuing my undergraduate work, and in night school, me and a whole bunch of other folks, and I'd never really paid attention to the fact that I was the only black person that I'd seen on the campus. But one night, a man came during class, came in, guy wearing a suit, and he sat in the back, and at the end of class, he came up to me and he said, are you Guillory? No, he said, Gilroy. Are you Gilroy? I said, yes, my name's Elbert Guillory. And he said, well, I just wanted to congratulate you, Mr. Gilroy. You're the first colored student that we've had at Old Dominion College.
So well, speaking of desegregating, you also did some protesting. Not protesting. You did peaceful. You were injured. You were during the civil rights era. Was that?
Yes.
You want to share that story with us?
My first arrest came in the public library.
Oh, tell us about your first arrest first.
There were many arrests between age 15. My first arrest was when I was 15. Many arrests between age 15 and age 23, 24. A lot of peaceful protests, always very disciplined, part of Martin Luther King's approach to peaceful protests. But during those, gassed, dog-bitten, fire-hosed, billy clubbed, still carry some scars from those days.
Yeah, before the camera, I want you to know, he showed me the scar on his arm from when he was peacefully protesting. And, it's a pretty ugly scar. You said it was a billy club with barbed wire on it, right?
Yes.
And then you have a dog bite scar.
On my derriere.
But he didn't show that one to me. And I don't want to see that one. But the other thing I want to point out is and we didn't talk about this, but this is interesting, you just made me think about it, is back when you protested during Martin Luther King days, protests were peaceful and the police officers were violent.
That is correct.
Now our protesters are violent.
And the police are peaceful.
And the police officers are peaceful. So it's kind of a swap there, on that. So we're going to bounce around a little bit because there's so much to tell here. So if I ask a question that's slightly off topic, I promise you we're going to come back, on some of these topics. But you've got years of human rights, scars to prove it, dog bite that I don't want to see. But you've also been shot at.
Yes.
Will you tell us that story?
First time I was shot at was at a filling station when I was 15, 16. And black folk weren't able to use the white restrooms.
Okay.
I was supposed to walk around the back door, the back of the filling station, lean against the wall and relieve myself. In the middle of the day, out in public.
Yeah, in public.
And on that particular day, I couldn't do that. I was not ready for that level of degradation. So I walked into the bathroom and started to urinate, and the man came in and threw me out and pulled his gun on me, and it was not a pleasant situation. Fortunately, my gun that I pulled out was bigger than his gun.
He recognized that your gun was bigger than his gun.
And he recognized by the way that I held my gun and aimed it at his forehead, he understood that maybe we should just put our guns down.
Away, yeah.
And that's how it ended.
What year was this? What time frame was this?
That would have been June of 1960.
Okay. I'm giving people a time frame because, when you hear stories like this, today's times, it wouldn't be as, I don't want to say peaceful, it might have a different ending today's time. It's almost like back then there was still, there was still a recognition, if you will, that you meant business, and it could be done in a way where we're going to walk away from this.
Yes. I carried a gun, even though I was a young man, a boy.
Yeah.
Because I've grown up in a violent world, a world where my rights were not always respected, and I would know there were times when I would need to have a weapon to defend myself.
Yeah.
So, and I grew up around guns. I was an excellent marksman. My mom, my dad, and I used to go and shoot the little ducks down with the little pellet rifles.
Yeah.
And we always won. I mean, but I was able to hold my own even as a kid of 6 and 7 years old.
Well, you mentioned a couple times about being arrested several times, but I want people to know about the first time that you were arrested. That was a great story. Will you please share it with us?
Yeah, the first time I was arrested was at a public library, and I went into the public library to get a book. Black folk couldn't go to the public library, and if a black kid wanted a book, you'd have to get it from your at that point segregated schools. Have to go to the black school library and order the book. The librarian at school would order the book from the public librarian. The public librarian would deliver the book to the librarian at school,
Yeah.
and then I would go and get it from that
Right.
librarian. That works, but it doesn't work during the summer months when schools closed. So I went to get a book, and the lady explained the system to me, and I appreciated that very respectfully. And she said, "You're gonna have to get out of here before I call the police." So there was a little table there, and I sat down at the little table. There were some magazines on it, and so I pretended to read while I waited for the police to come and get me. And because I understood and I respected that there were consequences for my behavior, and I was ready to face those consequences. But if I fight America's wars and pay America's taxes, I want full benefits from
Right.
the country. So I'd earned my right.
And what I like that you said, when you said you attempted to read, not that you couldn't read, but that you said what was the word you used? While you're waiting for the police to come knowing you'll be arrested?
Yeah, I was pretending to read, but I was shaking in my boots.
But you're willing to face reality and do a peaceful protest to make your rights, to stand for your rights.
Absolutely. Someone had to break the ice, and I was the icebreaker. Now, kids can go to the library, and they have no idea that there was ever a time when they could not. But for us to reach this point in American history, we had to go through those days. And I'm very, very, very comfortable. There are scars on my body, but not on my soul.
I like that. Scars on your body, but not on your soul.
Oh, no. I'm very proud of those days. I'm proud of America. I'm proud of the America that existed then. I'm more proud of the America that exists today.
And it's, when you look back, the protests and the things that happened then that were peaceful, the peaceful protest got us to where we are today.
Absolutely.
So do you think that the protests that are going on today are going to advance us or retreat us?
Unfortunately, I think that the protests today are counterproductive. The burning, the looting, the killing.
Right.
That we being black folk, about 13% of America's population. Justice cannot prevail without the goodwill of the majority of Americans. And so if we, as Martin Luther King did, he partly shamed, partly prayed, and partly argued and pulled in the rest of America's goodwill to make those changes that we made in the late 50s and early 60s. Well, now these protests are pushing the goodwill away. They're destroying goodwill of the majority of Americans. And so America's getting tired of the looting, the burning, the senseless
Right.
lawlessness. And that is going to hurt in the long run. It's not time it's time to put the matches in your pocket.
The matches back in your pocket. I like that.
And sit down and talk. We can get to understand each
Right.
other, find common ground, and we can build a new road for America, a new way for America.
And not that I want to point out, an ugly aspect of it, but as we talked about earlier too, was that when you see these riots, it's not all black people that are rioting. It's a combination of a lot of white people too, yes. And they're the ones that are also looting and destroying minority communities. And so when you say destroy the goodwill, this isn't just people, those communities destroying their goodwill, it's people from other communities destroying the goodwill of people that have worked so hard within their own communities to create something that they can be proud of and get themselves out of the poverty and out of the where they've been.
Absolutely. Small businesses, little mom and pop stores and bakeries have been destroyed. I mean, people's livelihoods have been destroyed by this rioting and looting. It's been a big disaster for America.
Well, let's hope in this video we get some solutions. Now, what do you think is one of the things that we can as a community or we as America can do to help solve some of those problems or help stop some of that?
I think getting to know each other. If you and I are going to get along, I have to be acceptable to you, and I have to be accepted by you.
Mm-hmm.
We have to each accept each other.
Right.
And so each of us must behave in a certain acceptable way.
I understand.
We have to understand that, and we have to talk to each other. And we have to address the problem of education in America. Those are the two biggest things that I believe that we need to do. Talk to each other and educate young people, because our public school systems are.
And I understand what you're saying, because I like to talk to other people. That goes without thought if you know it. But I'm always looking for other ideas. And some of my Democrat friends, have great ideas and great solutions. And some of my Democrat friends are more conservative or more Republican than some of my Republican friends. So when you truly talk to each other and you truly sit down and listen, you find ideas and things about each other and find out things that help us get along together and unite on ideas and unite on solutions instead of being divided by ideologies and what a party thinks that we should think of each other.
Extremely well said. Extremely well said.
Thank you.
We can find that common ground because there are many things that are common to us.
Now you, again, I'm going to kind of go back and forth on some things, but you're a Second Amendment guy. Talk about more about you. You're a Second Amendment guy. Why is it that you believe in the Second Amendment so much?
Well, I grew up around guns. My dad, Macy Guillory, fought in World War I in the trenches, was a marksman. And coming from Cajun, Louisiana, he was also a French translator for the U.S. Army. But when he came back, he became involved in some lucrative business ventures, making good corn whiskey, which was illegal at that time.
So a French translator in the war, marksman in the war, now turned bootlegger.
Yes, yes. So he had money, and a group of night riders came to his home one night and decided to relieve him of some of that money. They knew he was making money because he was a bootlegger.
Right. Yeah.
So they were going to take some of his money. But he had expected someone to come and try to rob him and harm his family. So he told his wife and 2 children at that time to go and get under the mattresses that he planned for them to do. And at every portal, every window, and every door, he had placed at least one gun and ammunition. So he ran from the window to the door to the other window, firing and reloading and refiring and reloading. And the night riders, two or three of them were shot. Thought that they'd come upon a nest of armed men. One man with his guns protecting his family.
Amazing.
That story, which if you go to Elbert Guillory YouTube and look at the Legend of Macy Guillory.
Legend of Macy Guillory on Elbert Guillory's YouTube channel.
You'll see a more fully developed version of that story. But growing up with that background and being around guns, since I was a little tiny boy, everyone had them and everyone used them, and using the BB gun since I was 4 or 5 to shoot birds and all. That's just a part of it.
And just being a country boy at heart there. National politics again. There's a story out there that there's a national news story that they say that black students should be graded differently than the rest of students. Why is that a bad idea?
I can't think of any rational reason why anybody would come up with something that stupid. We must all compete in this world, in this society. Our schools are bad enough already. Now, if we decide that we're going to start giving an affirmative action grade.
Affirmative action grade, I like that.
Here's a D student in biology. We're going to give him a B so he can go to medical school, and 20 years from now he wants to come and do surgery on my heart. I don't want a D student who was graded, who was given an affirmative action grade. I want the guy who worked hard, who studied hard, who earned an A, and who is now a doctor. I want that guy to do my surgery. I don't want some affirmative action. I don't want the engineer building my house. I don't want the architect designing my home. I don't want anything from someone who has had to get an affirmative action grade to get out of school.
And what I also get out of this is, if people in this country have fought so hard for equal rights, and there are people who have died for those equal rights, and people who have gotten, banged up and scarred up for equal rights, to say, I'm happy if you make everybody else equal but not me. That's almost a way of saying that you're willing to not be equal and that you don't really want to be equal. I want equal rights, but I really don't want to be equal because I want the rights that are down below.
It's also a way of saying, I am not good enough to compete.
Right.
So give me a break. Give me an affirmative action grade.
And that's why God makes everybody different, because some people He wants to do other things, and other people choose to do other things, and that love and that kind of equality of everybody having an equal playing field but having a different skill set allows them to do what they're good at and let them excel at what their heart, mind, and body brings them to.
Absolutely.
I love it. What right now there's a big push to make mail-in voting nationwide. And when you hear about mail-in voting, you hear we hear about all the fraud that goes along with it. Now, I know that mail-in voting exists for veterans and for people with disadvantages or elderly, which I don't want to take those mail-in voting rights away. I would like to see mail-in voting expand. I'd like to see mail-in voting still allowed for them, but I would like to see voting rights expanded in the way of absentee voting and early voting. Those things expanded so maybe elderly people, handicapped people can go in person to vote and not have to worry about things. Mail-in voting for veterans is a whole other subject, but why is it you think that mail-in voting is a bad thing?
I've spent more than 50 years in politics, and so I have seen the good, the bad, and the very, very ugly of voting shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
I know what goes on. I've seen what goes on, and this business of mail-in votes it's a boondoggle. Folks are going to steal elections based on these mail-in votes. We should all have an ID, and we should vote in person unless there's some real bad problem that a person has.
Right.
If they're really bedridden or something. And in a case like that, the registrar should have a van and go to those persons' homes and collect their votes, get their votes.
It's a good idea.
But this business of mail-in votes, I think that's horrible.
Does mail-in voting hurt any ethnic group, do you think? Does it hurt any group of people? Now, I'm not just speaking ethnically, I'm also speaking maybe financially, but does mail-in voting hurt maybe even minorities disproportionately, do you think?
I think that it's going to hurt minorities, it's going to hurt black folk particularly, because the mail-in voting is going to permit illegals.
Right, because we all know that some of those states want to let their illegal aliens vote.
Exactly. In California, in New Mexico, in New York, you can expect a major, I mean, hundreds of thousands of illegals will be voting. And California is letting illegals vote already. They're giving them driver's licenses and all that sort of thing. So it's going to hurt in their competition with black folk for jobs and education and health care for those limited pots. Americans who've been here and standing in line for 300 years will be hurt in that.
Which goes to the Electoral College. The Electoral College, there's a movement in this country to remove the Electoral College to go just a popular vote. And so I'm asking the same question and then kind of relate the two, which is will removing the Electoral College hurt minorities? Will it hurt other ethnic groups or others, people from different financial backgrounds?
Very much the same thing. California and New York, once again, those are the places that will benefit from having an electoral, from disbanding the Electoral College.
Right.
And so they would have a much greater voice, California and New York would, in American politics. And giving them, if you look at what they have done in New York and in California, their policies have hurt black folk, have hurt homeless people, have hurt poor white people. We are the ones, those three groups of folks, who will be really hurt if California and New York have a bigger voice in American politics. So the Electoral College, disbanding them is a bad idea. Got to turn things
Protect the
down.
Electoral College any way that we can.
Absolutely.
Because while the Electoral College protects state rights, because that's the way the Electoral College is designed, without going into a big explanation on it, those individual votes are protected within their state rights because every vote counts for that state, and those people's votes are now magnified, those individual votes are now magnified by the rights within their state instead of being banished or having their vote banished by the population of California or New York.
Absolutely.
In that. Well, so when we talk about that, and it hurts, and it disproportionately hurts our community, let's talk about the census. The census now is another way that people are being hurt if they're not filling out the census. It's another thing that if they get rid of the Electoral College and they don't vote the census and you don't get counted in the census, now communities are hurt as a result also.
Absolutely. It is so important for all of us to fill in that form and send it back, or however you're going to do it, on the internet or by paper. But we must be counted, because that's how the American pie is divided along those lines. If there are 50,000 people in Louisiana, then Louisiana will get 50. But if there are 1 million people in California, comparatively, California is going to get so much more than Louisiana will. So we must all send in our forms and be counted.
Keep people more involved.
Absolutely.
I remember the story you told me about when you were a young man. You saw firsthand your gut feeling about, and I'll let tell the story here more in detail, but I'll remind you of it, which is when you saw the votes coming in during an election from California and Chicago. You want to tell that story?
Yes. I think that it was John Kennedy's election. I think he was running against a young fellow named Richard Nixon. And I was watching the votes coming in and being counted. It was a very exciting night. But they'd gone across the country, New York, that time zone, and then the next time zone, and they were finally on the West Coast. And as California would send votes in that would neutralize John Kennedy's presidency, from Chicago, another couple of 100,000 votes would be put in. They kept finding these votes in Chicago. And that's when I really understood. I started to understand corruption in voting and corruption in politics. For them, that many hours after the polls had closed, to continue to find hundreds of thousands of votes that would neutralize the votes of California was just amazing to a little country boy from Opelousas.
Now let's take that concept and bring it to today's times. And when we think about the effort to do mail-in voting here in the United States and make nationwide mail-in voting, make it all open, and then of course California and New York wants everybody to be able to vote. Imagine, if you will, if the nation had one of California's laws, and this is what you would get if you eliminate the Electoral College. You'd get laws nationwide like California has, which is the one that says they will count a mail-in ballot up to 17 days after an election. So imagine, if you will, in today's time, 60 days or 50 days from now, Donald Trump, let's say he wins the election, and the Democrats say no, there's mail-in votes coming in, and up to 17 days later, these votes are appearing just like the ones appeared in a trunk in the back roads of Al Franken's district in Minnesota. So that time frame and that mail-in gives an opportunity for votes to magically appear like they did between the Kennedy and Nixon election, between Chicago and California. Votes just keep to be appearing. And might I point out, for people who don't like Trump, that this works both ways. If you allow this to mail-in balloting to happen on this election or future elections, there's a possibility that your guy might not win. You might get the guy out now that you don't like, but what happens in future elections when these laws are in place, when the guy you want to win doesn't win because the other side took advantage of the mail-in voting laws? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. The reason that we have succeeded as a nation of laws is because they are applied equally. And so one person cannot get an advantage over the other, and the other cannot get an advantage over the one. But when you start tampering with it like that and say, well, just continue counting votes,
right?
You have so much opportunity for shenanigans. And the guy who gets the shaft this time may be my guy, but tomorrow the guy who gets the shaft may well be your guy.
Exactly. In the meantime, the voters are the ones getting the shaft.
Every time.
Because, while women who have fought for voting rights, minorities who fought for voting rights, have died, have gone to jail for the right to vote, to go cast their vote, only to have weeks later, 17 days later, according to some law, some politician or person in power to be able to have a suitcase of votes that just now disrespected, disregarded, negated your right to vote.
Yes.
And that's what we're against. We're going to switch in topics to sports. Now we have a time where sports teams are becoming a little bit disliked for what's going on. For make a long story short, that there's sports teams that people are starting to actually, we see the playoffs for the NBA now are down 23%. We see people are mad at the NFL, and part of the reason right now was because the NFL, particularly the Saints, our New Orleans Saints, are now wearing the name of somebody, and I'm not using this opportunity to jump on a bandwagon of saying I'm against the Saints for doing that. I'm using this opportunity to make the analogy that we're about to make here, which is that they're wearing the name of somebody to be able to promote an agenda, when the reality is the NFL has at times ignored the abuse of women, and now there's somebody here that has abused women, and that they have that name on. So it's angered a lot of people. Is the point that I'm making. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm one of the angry people. The NFL is like a little lost sheep wandering out in the woods, and instead of taking a firm stand for something that is of value to America, like you mentioned, domestic violence. Instead of having a zero tolerance policy for domestic violence for people who play football, if you beat up women, you can't play football in the NFL.
Right.
That is something that I like.
And the NFL's kind of ignored that. They've ignored violence against women.
Completely.
But now they got the name of the helmet of some guy that's what made people mad. But
who's a rapist. Mm-hmm. Raped a 15-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And so now they're wearing his banner because he fought with the police, was tased not once but twice. And police don't tase people for playing tiddlywinks.
Right.
He was doing some bad stuff and was armed and was possibly seeking to get another weapon in addition to the one that he had in his hand. So for them to take that on as a cause célèbre is incomprehensible.
So would you say, let's help separate this, because there's some people who are really upset that that people would be so angry at the NFL or angry at these players for taking a stand, but we want people to look at the issue of zero tolerance, or at the issue of the lack of zero tolerance, not be mad at players for standing for what they believe in or for their opinion. We don't want to take their opinion away from them. We want people to understand that a zero tolerance policy would in some ways change the way people are into society. A zero tolerance policy would spread a better treatment of women.
Absolutely. And what they're doing, these are the same people who said that Tim Tebow could not wear a cross on his sweatband. He could not wear a cross. Tim Tebow could not take a knee on the field because he used to take a knee to cross himself and pray. He was not permitted to do that. But now, not only can you still can't wear the cross, but you can wear all kinds of other banners, and you can kneel down during the national anthem or even walk away. It seems like the NFL has flipped itself upside down and against America. And I, for one, I'm through with it. I mean, I was big football player, ex-football player.
So I think what should come out of all this is maybe see a zero tolerance policy. Is that what I'm understanding?
Absolutely.
But that could help our society. That could truly help our community. Not taking away people's right to protest or speak their mind, but try to use this as an opportunity to find a solution to where we have a zero tolerance policy to help women and also find ways to help improve our society in other ways.
Absolutely. Bring some good ideas and some solutions to the table.
Use it as a teaching moment instead of as a preaching moment.
Well said. Well said.
And again, what I want to point out about that situation is, for me, it's not as much as I'm not angry about people speaking their mind. I'm not upset about people saying they don't think that was right. What it means is I'm upset about the hypocrisy of it, because while I might not agree with somebody's opinion, I might not agree with what they want to say, but I can defend their right to be able to say things. But at the same time, I can be angry about the hypocrisy in this situation, and that's what I'm upset about, is the hypocrisy of it. And speaking of hypocrisy, we have elected officials who say, good for thee, but not for me, like Nancy Pelosi.
Yes. Oh, that Nancy hairdo that she got there really stirred the pot. Doesn't want anyone else. And so she slipped into using her power to get her hair done, but it was closed to everyone else. Special rules. Not for me, but for thee. Not for thee, but for me, as you said.
It goes back to the hypocrisy of it.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to point out in these videos and these interviews is that I want more people to get educated on solutions, ideas, and not be divided on ideologies, but spot the hypocrisy. Spot how we're about how ethnicities and socioeconomic and different financial brackets, how people are being manipulated in ways that divide us instead of being united on ideas and solutions.
Unfortunately, that's correct. That's the divide and conquer approach by the enemies of America is what's being implemented right now. We're going to divide them, and then we'll be able to conquer them.
And also what I want to point out is, when I travel, as I've been traveling and interviewing people, I find that most people all kind of agree on most things. Very few of us are really separated far left or far right, especially in Louisiana. I'm finding that whether you're Republican or Democrat, we actually here in our state find ways to work together. And when you travel states, it seems that people of opposite parties tend to work together better than they do on national levels. And I want to promote that. I want to promote the ability to listen to our fellow Democrats, listen to our fellow Republicans, and not give up your ideologies. We don't have to give up our personal beliefs. We don't have to give up our what we truly believe in, but we don't even have to reach across the aisle. What it usually means is giving up your beliefs. It means that listening to each other, we can find solutions, and it might be harder, that we have in common to help each other and help our communities.
I have a few good friends who are from the far, far left in American politics. And I have some good friends who are from the far, far right.
I agree with that. I have the same way.
Klan members of the KKK. And we can all talk to each other. I can talk to both sides because there is some commonality. There's some common ground that I can find with just about every human being that there is. If it's nothing more than the commonality of the fact that we have to breathe. And we can start right there.
Exactly.
And expand that. There's no need to just gnaw at each other and fight at each other and tear at each other all the time. If we sit down and talk, we'll find a lot more common ground than we think that there is. Instead
of allowing the rioting and the disruption and and the constant bickering over ideologies, like you said, we found that common ground. You know, there's a I want to speak to you about the Biden's vice presidential choice on a legal ground, not on a ground that where she's gotten beaten up a lot on. I want to speak because you actually, being a defender, being in the criminal justice system, you have an opinion on Kamala Harris I'd like to hear.
When she had a grand opportunity to help first as a district attorney and then as the attorney general of the whole state of California, what she did was implement policies that would send young men, minority men particularly, who had minor drug charges, nonviolent, and they had to go to jail, had to go to prison. I think that by filling up the prisons with these young men, she did a great disservice to the minority communities of California. And now she comes with that same kind of background, and those are the policies that she and Biden will foist on America again. This extreme jail is the only solution to very, very minor drug crimes. And most of those crimes now are being removed from the law books because marijuana is being legalized. It's already legal in 11 states, and the feds are about to legalize it nationally. So
you don't have to be anti-crime to be anti-jailing. You know, I think we've learned as a society that just automatically throwing everybody in jail doesn't necessarily help our society as much but there's some criminal reform there available. There's some things, there's some tax dollars being spent on maybe the wrong people. Maybe there's some opportunity to help our society in a way by other methods, which I think what you're telling me is that Kamala Harris did not look at other options. Instead, she simply just said, lock them up.
That was it. That was her approach. And you can Google it. Anyone who's out there, you can Google her performance as the Attorney General or District Attorney, and you will see that what I'm saying is absolutely true.
She even wanted to lock up the parents of offenders. Is that correct?
Yes.
So this is not beneficial to any community in general. But again, I want to point out the hypocrisy here, because while they're trying to make a vice presidential pick look like they're hard on criminals, at the same time, when you look at the actions, there's a lot of hypocrisy in this, including other things you've pointed out about her.
And now she pretends that she's always been this big criminal justice reform person. This woman doesn't even know how to spell criminal justice reform.
That's quite a statement. However, I often wonder if if they picked her from California, knowing that they were probably already going to win California.
Yes.
Why wouldn't they have picked the vice presidential pick that was from a state that they needed to win, like Florida or Georgia or something like that? It's almost as if the Democrats have a plan to want to win the election without having the best candidates, but do it through a more subversive method like, I don't know, mail-in voting? You saw where I was going with that. And then we go to Biden. Joe Biden, is there anything about Joe Biden that you want to point out that you want to, that observation?
A couple of things. Number one, Biden has been in Washington, D.C. for almost 50 years, and he has done nothing of serious value. Number two, he was vice president with Obama, and during their entire 8 years, they did nothing of value to the country. But both of those families became multi-millionaires.
Especially the Bidens.
The Obamas also.
Okay.
Don't leave him out. Obama was worth $1.5 million when he went to the White House and today he's worth many, 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 many millions. They made billions for themselves and did nothing for the country. You can't tell me one single person who has benefited other than them and their families. Big pharmacy, pharmaceutical companies wrote the Obamacare, the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies wrote Obamacare so that they could make billions of dollars and the American people would suffer. And that's what has happened.
Yeah, healthcare is still a disaster.
Still a disaster.
But let's point out too that healthcare is a disaster, and while the Republicans had the popular vote a long time ago, they held all three chambers at one time. They didn't do anything about healthcare, which gave the Democrats. The point I'm making about that is because I want people to see that we as Republicans still look at opportunities and not ideologies. We want to see solutions. We're tired of seeing elected officials do what they want to do when the Republicans at that time didn't do anything when they had control of all three branches and didn't. So the Democrats got in, they did what they had to do to get control of the healthcare system, and now we the people are suffering as a result, from that. And I think one of the best things that we can do to stop that in the future is being more involved and talking to each other to find the solutions instead of beating each other up on ideologies and beliefs.
Absolutely true. As we get away from Washington, D.C. and through the rest of the country, the Republican Party has been really, over the last 2 years, energized in reaching out to other people, touching other people, talking with other people, so that the message of values and that common ground
to bring more people to see that the Republican values are more in line with America. Is that what you're telling me?
Absolutely, absolutely. And during this election, I think you'll see that even more so. Taking Trump aside, because he's in many instances a very popular figure, and in some instances not a very popular figure. But setting him aside, the Republican Party, I think, has made major strides and is making even greater strides into finding that common ground with America.
And let's talk about bringing up the past too. Didn't Biden vote against the Civil Rights Act under LBJ?
Absolutely. He was against civil rights acts from the time that he got into Washington, D.C. And he is referred to black kids. He said that he didn't want his kids to go to school because if black kids were there, it would be like a jungle.
This is what Biden said.
That's what Biden said. In addition to, at one point, referring to black kids as kind of like cockroaches crawling up his legs.
Oh, he did say that in the video.
Yes.
Does a leopard ever change its stripes?
No.
Okay.
Just a few weeks ago, he was telling black folk, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
Well, he was big during the LBJ era, as you said, voting against civil rights. Is that correct? Biden?
I think he was a little after the LBJ era. I don't know where he was in the 64 Rights Act, but in the early 70s, completely his record was anti-integration, anti-America,
gotcha.
anti-minority.
I see. I was giving you the opportunity so we could get that timeline right for people, but it's the hypocrisy that I'm trying to point out. It's how people see that. When we look at what Biden's done in the past, we look at what his vice presidential pick has done in the past, but I want to bring up Trump for a second. And I don't want to seem like we're just being one-sided. There's good, there's bad for people, but I want more people to understand. I've heard somebody say that Trump speaks like a buffoon. How could we vote for somebody who speaks like that? And I want to get your opinion on what we can tell people or what we can point out to people who might say that.
I point out his record. He has done more for America. Jobs, lowering taxes, bringing back jobs, manufacturing jobs from overseas that had gone from America, had been gone for years, since the Clinton years. What he's done in minority communities, what he's done for historically black colleges and universities, his support for school choice for little black kids locked into badly performing public schools, what he's done across the board, minority and women's employment, again, their numbers, phenomenal. Trump has done a good job. He may sound like some people want to hear a president sound, and he sounds like some people don't want a president to sound, but Trump delivers. Best president other than Richard Milhous Nixon.
I love it. So for those people that might not like the way he sounds, it's a way to say, hey, well, look at what he does.
Absolutely.
And what I'd like to point out is he doesn't have any past presidents supporting him. He has a lot of Republicans turning against him. And the reason I'm bringing this up is for this reason. He promised to drain the swamp.
Yes.
And I'd like to point out one of the reasons why I support him is because at a point of time when the joke has been made that Republicans, Democrats, politicians that is, are just two sides of the same coin. Here's somebody who's losing support from people in his own party, not because they don't agree with him, but because he doesn't play the party game. He's playing the people's game and not an elitist game. And I think people see somebody different than what they're used to seeing. We're used to seeing politicians kiss our butts. And now we don't see somebody kissing our butt, so we can be mad at a president because he's not kissing butts. And it doesn't sound right because it's not what we're used to hearing. But what we see him doing is helping the community, but speaking like a regular person.
Yes. If you look at the Bush years, the Bush presidency and the Obama presidency, Bush the Republican, Obama the Democrat, their economic policies were identical. Their foreign policies were identical. They're the ones who got us into all of these wars in the Middle East between Bush and Obama.
Correct.
Obama's the one who invaded Syria. Obama's the one who invaded Libya. Bush did Iraq and some other places. But those are the guys who created the conditions that permitted ISIS to rise. The puppeteers who controlled Bush are the same puppeteers who controlled Obama. They don't control the present president of the United States of America.
And he speaks his mind.
He speaks his mind, and his policies have flown in the face of these guys, and they are upset. Even people like Colin Powell, Republican, because he is part of that group that controlled Bush and controlled Obama.
Amazing. So what I want to talk about monuments for a second, because you have a unique story about that. They're trying to take down monuments. Now they're saying that the mayor of D.C. wants to remove the Lincoln Memorial, Thomas Jefferson, all these monuments. What do you think about that?
I think a fool who is ignorant of history will repeat history. We have an opportunity to teach our children the good, the bad, and the ugly about the past. I have a little corner.
Wait till you hear this one about the little corner.
There's a corner in my living room called Paw Paw's Corner. And my grandchildren call it that because every time they come to visit, there's something in that corner that we pull out and discuss. There's a Confederate flag flying. There are signs that say,
But you have a Confederate flag in Paw Paw's Corner?
of course.
Okay.
And if I could get one of these Confederate monuments, I'm gonna put it out on the front yard because it won't fit in the living room.
Yeah.
But signs that say white only and colored only.
All this is in your corner, Paw Paw's Corner.
All this is in Paw Paw's Corner. It's history that other people want to erase, but I have to teach my grandchildren what there was, the good and the bad of America. And part of that has to do with the Confederate flag. Part of it has to do with the Jim Crow laws that I grew up under in the South. But they need to know that. So they come to Paw Paw's Corner and learn some stuff.
And having that Confederate flag get you a chance to teach them, about the past and where we've come, which is something that in New Orleans, when they were trying to take down the monuments, there was a great idea that was put out there, but the mayor at the time did not adopt it, which is instead of taking monuments down, we put more monuments up. Now I would not recommend this in D.C. because D.C. is unique in its space and how it was designed, but in the public square in our small cities and towns where, say, they will put more monuments, and you could put up civil rights monuments around the Confederate monuments and have like a Paw Paw's Corner, publicly speaking, where you can say, this was a Confederate general that you might have perceived to be done this, but look at what's happened since then. And if we study history that way, we can truly educate people.
And as we study people, like Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was not a slave holder. He was given some slaves, and he freed those slaves. He did not grow up on a plantation where his family owned slaves. We need to study the people and study what made them great. These are people who rose to a very high level of performance at a given moment in time.
Right.
We should study those people, learn about those people. Thomas Jefferson. There's no reason to throw out his he was a major American contributor to America and its founding. So let's study these folks, and let's study what they did. Study the good and the bad about them.
They're human.
Yes.
Like Trump, he's human.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes when you notice human flaws, it might make you not like somebody. But when you look at, say, Winston Churchill was human. Winston Churchill, you look at his flaws, he was a very flawed individual.
Yes.
But when you look at how his actions and his policies shaped freedoms and liberties around in England, in that part of the country, or that part of the world rather, you look at the freedoms they have today because of some of his actions.
You have to take your hat off to Churchill. He was a phenomenal leader. I do not care for him personally.
Correct.
But he was a phenomenal leader, and I've got to give him that.
And his policies did things that, today we could look back through the lens of history, kind of like we looked at, at the time when they didn't like Ronald Reagan, but we look through history and see the great things that he did, just like if we look at the things that are being ignored today that Trump has done for the black community, for the people of our country, for everyone in this country, 10, 20 years from now, when those HBCUs are doing well because of a policy that he did or the policy that he had, we can look back and go, wow, look at the good thing that he did for this community. I want to ask some closing thoughts, is why are you a Republican?
Values. Being a country boy, having respect for life and being anti-abortion, having respect for guns, having respect for hard work. Being accustomed to it. I ran my own lawn service when I was 8 years old. I've been working since I was 8 years old, outside the home, making money. So getting up in the morning and going to work, climbing the American ladder. My granddad, being born a slave, And in just 2 generations, here I am.
Because of America.
Because this is it, the land of opportunity. I love it.
No excuses.
What's that?
Put the matches back in your pocket.
Put the matches. My mother used to tell me, success needs no excuse, but failure has 1,000 excuses. Excuses were not permitted at my house.
Success has no excuse. Failure has a lot of excuses. I love that.
That's what she said.
That's her right there. You'll notice that we are in Albert's office, and I know you haven't noticed this video, so you might see some things back there. But this is such a great thought when you think of all the things you've shared with us today. How your law office right now here, where this land that we're sitting on for this video, is land that your grandfather bought as a slave or a freed slave from a plantation owner, which is just 2 blocks from here. And now you're practicing law, and you've traveled the country. You've worked in all these states that you mentioned before, and you've been hired by companies and individuals all over this country to take care of human rights. And today you sit in Opelousas, Louisiana, talking about how wonderful America is.
Absolutely. This is my country.
What is there anything that scares you? This next election, you mentioned Earl to me before that you're worried about this election. Why are you worried?
I think that we're at a crossroads in America, and there are forces that really want to divide and conquer America, want to destroy America. They want to destroy our automobile industry, our oil and gas industry, want to destroy so much of America, turn it into a socialist, open borders kind of place. That will destroy the economy and the character. It'll destroy the nature of America. And I want my grandchildren to grow up in liberty and in freedom, because it does not exist anywhere else on earth. Nowhere else in the world can you find the opportunity, the freedom, the liberty that you find in this country. And I'm afraid that if we don't really become active and do some things to protect our country right now, and especially on November 3rd, if we lose it, it'll be lost for good.
So instead of changing America, we need to work together, listen to each other, and find common ideas and solutions, and look out for the good solutions that are for the greater good of our individuals and our country, to protect the things that we've had in this country.
Absolutely.
Amen. I'm glad to share this country with you, Elbert Guillory. I really am. You're an amazing individual, an amazing person. I thank you very much for your time. And I think you've said it all. I'd like for everybody, please, to share this video with some friends. If you go to William Wallis for America, which is my Facebook page, and William Wallis for America, my YouTube page, you'll be able to share this video some more. And also my podcast. This video will later be turned into a podcast, and you can listen to the podcast on your favorite podcast player, whether that's iHeart, iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen to your podcast. You'll be able to hear the audio version of this as a podcast. And I want to thank everybody for their time. And again, between the census, the election, being involved, reaching out to people, listening, we can not only save this country, but we can improve it and be able to get past the things that we've been hearing in the media lately, and truly keep America the greatest country that it ever has been. Thank you, guys.